Welcome back to Mind of the Warrior, everybody. Doc with you here, as always. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by Graybeard Performance. Are you sick and tired of taking these crappy pre-workouts that you get all jittery and winded and your heart's racing, and then your workout's not any better? Then you get home and you can't fall asleep because your pre-workout now is actually doing something. It's keeping you awake. That's why I developed our all-natural energy formula. So just as the name implies, it's completely natural. There's nothing nasty in here. You're not going to get any nasty side effects. You're going to get a nice boost of energy from the yerba mate, the BCAAs, and the B vitamins. You're going to be able to complete your workout, but then when you want to relax, you're going to be able to. I take this before jiu-jitsu class in the evening. I still come home and fall asleep. No problem. So go to graybeardperformance.com, check out our energy formula and all of our supplements. Very delighted to have back on the Mind of the Warrior podcast today, return guest, my good friend, colleague, physician, author, veteran, patriot, all around badass, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, Dr. Drew Winge. Brother, welcome back.
Thanks, man. It's good to be back.
Good to have you back. People have been jonesing for this, man. I get, no matter how many different episodes we do, talking about testosterone, talking about men's health, age management, people are always jonesing for more. So I'm glad you can come back on. Yeah. We can talk about it some more. Some of the questions I've got written down are literally so I can improve my practice, because I can consider you to be the expert in this. Let's jump right in. We talked a little bit about this last time you're on. We talked about declining testosterone levels. Yeah. And that's something that's a global pandemic right now. Why don't you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, this is a huge issue. And it's not just declining testosterone levels, but it's declining sperm counts. And there was actually, I just got in my inbox last week, I get these like article summaries from, different journals and whatnot. And one of them was it was a study out of one of the universities in Israel, I think, and they literally said that this decline in sperm count that we've been experiencing over the last 50 years, they said it's a threat to the existence of the human race.
Yeah, so I mean, that's when you say that, problem. That's literally the first thing that comes to mind, and I don't know why more people aren't seeing that.
Yeah, it's just it hasn't, there are certain parts of the medical community that are like very aware of it, but the general public is not. And this is a major problem. Testosterone levels have been, there's very good evidence they've been declining at a steady rate for at least the last 50 years. And there's a lot of theories about why that is, and it's probably not just one thing, obviously, but it's it's multifactorial. All the it's products of modern living essentially, but it's obesity, it's poor diet. A large part of it is probably exposure to these endocrine disrupting compounds that are everywhere in the environment, that are almost completely unavoidable. They're in the air, the water, the food, packaged goods, all that kind of stuff. We all know about the sticky receipts. The receipts that you get at the grocery store that have that kind of oily film on them, things like BPA, that sort of stuff. But there are literally thousands of chemicals that are in the environment, that are used in industry, that have been documented to influence hormone levels, not just in men, but in women too. So that's a big part of it. Obesity is not helping, but those two things are related. Like there's a big connection between endocrine disrupting compound exposure, like even when you're a fetus, before you've even been born, and then your chance of developing obesity when you're older. So it's this giant toxic soup of chemicals, poor lifestyle, and who knows, there may be other factors that we haven't even discovered yet. But the bottom line is that things are going in the wrong direction when it comes to both testosterone and sperm counts, male fertility. Women are having issues too. There's a lot more like polycystic ovarian syndrome and menstrual irregularities and things like that, probably from the same thing. Yeah. So this article that I read, I mean, they were like just very blunt. Like, if we don't fix this, they sort of called it a threat to the existence of the human race. So we might want to figure this out.
Yeah, it really is. And, I've seen some data on screen time, increased screen time being related to low testosterone. Now, is that because you're sedentary, or because of this? Like if I had that same screen time, but the screen was in front of me while I was doing squats, would it be the same?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah,
who knows?
Yeah, there's variables in there.
Screen time is associated with what do you do when you're sitting on your ass when you're watching a screen and you're probably mindlessly eating Cheetos?
Yeah.
Not
Something
really
like that,
helping things, right? So
yeah,
it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem.
I think there's societal factors at work here too. I
Yeah.
mean, it's,
Yeah.
we have devalued masculinity. We've come up with these
Absolutely.
completely bogus and baseless terms like toxic masculinity.
Yeah. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as
No, there's
toxic
absolutely no
masculinity.
such thing as
Yeah.
there's a toxic lack of masculinity. There's no
100%.
such thing as
Yeah.
toxic masculinity. It's
Yeah.
complete bull. Every definition I've ever heard for toxic masculinity is, I tell people this all the time. You're just describing an asshole.
You're
You're literally just describing an
asshole. I was
asshole.
going to say the same thing. Like,
Yeah, it has nothing to do with testosterone
No.
levels, masculinity, how
No.
much somebody can bench press, squat, whether or not they can fight. You're just describing an asshole. So let's call it what it is. Let's call an asshole for what they are. Instead of making up these bogus terms, making guys feel guilty about being masculine. Millions of years of evolution cannot be wrong. It's funny. We've had 50 years of declining testosterone, and if we were to believe all of the science fiction films and novelizations from the 1950s and 60s, we would get less masculine, less strong. We'd start to look like we'd start to look like that episode, the pilot episode of Star Trek with the guys with the big heads.
Oh, right.
We'd
Yeah.
be physically weak, but we would be able to move stuff be able to move things with our thoughts, and we'd be incredibly smart. But now that a report just came out recently that says IQ levels are declining as well. So we're literally losing as a species on every front at this point.
We're getting fatter and we're getting dumber.
Yeah.
So,
fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go.
Not good. I mean, you and I have joked about this before, but we know that movie Idiocracy, right?
That's more and more becoming true.
It's just a future. It's not a for entertainment. It's a future documentary.
It totally
Totally
is.
Yeah. So
what do you, now, aside from the societal factors, what specifically, we've already kind of determined, you and I have spoken about this before, certain people, certain groups of men either tend to be more predisposed to their testosterone dropping, or the caveat could be that they're just more in tune and that they notice it, or maybe they're just more vocal about it, right? It's like the pain scale. We don't know. The pain scale is pretty much worthless because it depends on self-reporting. But we do know that there's a certain subset of men. Okay, so we had a little technical difficulty there. I did a little bit of editing and we're back again. So what we were in the middle of talking about was the fact that we tend to see more reporting of low testosterone or low testosterone type symptoms in military, first responders, law enforcement. High prevalence of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, so head injuries, getting concussed. These are guys who push it hard, do combat sports. There is some debate about whether or not there's a burnout factor there involved. But one thing that we know definitely affects testosterone and is definitely common among these communities is poor sleep hygiene. So guys working shift work, guys going on deployment, going on reverse cycle, and all of these can affect testosterone. Are there any other groups, demographics that you're aware of that are particularly at risk for low T?
I mean, the obese.
Yeah, sure. And that's 60% of Americans.
Yeah, if not more.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. So body fat absolutely, has a very strong effect. There's something called MOSH. It's called morbid obesity secondary hypogonadism, which is just a fancy term for you have so much inflamed visceral body fat that you've essentially impacted your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland to the degree that you can't even make the signal down to the testicles to make testosterone. A lot of people don't realize this, but like body fat, especially visceral body fat, it's an endocrine organ. So it secretes all of these, they call them adipokines, most of which are not good for you, in large quantities. And so what you'll see is you'll see a 250-pound guy, 300-pound guy, and he'll have very low testosterone. And what he should have is high LH and FSH, the gonadotropes, if he had a normal axis. But because he's obese,
so what we should see is his brain or the central portion of his endocrine system is
Mhm.
trying to kick up
It
production.
should
That's what we
respond
should
to
see.
that and up those, but instead what you see is they'll be like low normal. So they're
Mm,
they're normal, but they're inappropriately normal. They shouldn't be normal. And
right.
basically that it's because that set point is it's basically been reset because of all the adipose tissue that they're carrying. So
Mhm.
those guys, if they do lose body fat and they lose a significant amount of body fat, they can recover their testosterone in some cases.
Mhm.
But that's difficult to do, and the older you are, the harder it gets. And there may come a point where you're not going to be able to recover that, even if you do lose the weight. So yeah, absolutely. Like in the military community, guys who have had TBIs, that is a risk factor, obviously. But it also is a risk factor. I know we're talking about testosterone, but traumatic brain injuries are even more associated with growth hormone deficiency, which, like, if you think testosterone problems fly under the radar in 40-year-old men,
Mhm.
growth hormone absolutely flies under the radar, because like a lot,
Mhm.
nobody thinks to check that
Yeah.
in a man who's had repeated head injuries. So
Yeah.
that's there's a lot of stuff when you get your noggin rattled. There's a lot of sensitive software and hardware in there, and
Mhm.
you need to make sure that you check all of that stuff, not just testosterone.
Yeah.
But getting back to your original question, I mean, if you have gotten obese, and here's the thing, like, you don't have to be morbidly obese, like Brendan Fraser, and that new movie that he's in, The Whale.
The whale. Yeah.
The whale, yeah. So you don't have to be a whale, to have a marked decline in your testosterone. You just have to be, and again, there's a genetic component to this, of course, but you could very easily, at like 21% body fat, you could be negatively impacting your testosterone levels, and nobody
Mm.
would bat an eye if you're walking around at 20 or 21%. Oh, you're doing pretty good. Well, maybe not. Technically, if you're 25% or above, because I don't
Mhm.
like to use BMI, at all.
Right.
Body fat percentage is where it's at. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. BMI is really unfair. I mean, it's
yeah,
unfair to guys like you. I'm not going to say
yeah,
guys like me,
yeah.
but
My
to guys
BMI
like you.
is 30.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
obese by BMI.
Right.
I weigh 235, 240. I'm
Yeah.
5'11", but I have like 12% body fat. So,
Because when the BMI scales were invented, like around World War I, people didn't have that much muscle.
yeah, so they're good. I think they were made by, I used to know this, but it was from like an insurance database. For your
Mhm.
average Joe, if you took 100 people with BMIs of 30, they're probably all going to be fat. You know what I mean?
Right.
So for
Yeah.
population
Typically.
based
Yeah.
studies, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it really, like, if you're in this age management space, or performance optimization, and you really need to look at body composition, obviously, and not body weight. So obesity starts at 25% body fat for a man
Right.
and 35% for a woman. So the average male in the United States is somewhere around 30% body fat. That's just average. So most men, even though they're not obese by BMI, are obese by body fat percentage. And you
Right.
don't have to be 25% to negatively impact your testosterone. So I can't remember if we talked about this on the last time, but the optimal body fat percentage for testosterone it's debatable. I don't know for sure. It's probably somewhere between 10 and 15%.
Right. Yeah, we talked about
So
that a little bit because I
yeah,
knew that I knew that when I got down to 10%, I started to not feel good.
correct. So
There's only
correct.
been two times in my life that
Yeah.
I've got my body fat percentage down that low, and I
Hmm.
start to kind of feel diminishing returns when
Yeah.
I get down to about 10%.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's very clear, like in like natural bodybuilders, for example, that once their body fat percentage starts getting too low, you start getting down in the single digits. That also negatively affects your testosterone levels too.
Right. Right.
So yeah, there's a sweet spot there in the middle. But
Mhm.
how many guys these days are walking around with 10 to 15% body fat? Not that
Yeah.
many, right? Like in the general
No.
population.
I
So
something else that kind of I'm going to throw the entire medical profession under the bus here because they deserve it.
Right.
It drives me absolutely crazy that, so for years we've been lying to people that, they come in, they're in their 50, literally guys, I'm 57 years old. Most guys my age, if you ask them, they're probably on about 3 medications, and
At least.
they've been told that this is just something, high blood pressure is just something that happens as you age.
Just happens.
That you should just accept it. Yeah, your blood sugar is getting a little bit crazy. It just happens as you age.
Yeah.
The same physician who will have no problem at all looking somebody in the eye who is overweight, doesn't exercise, doesn't eat right, probably smokes, probably gets too much caffeine. They'll have no problem looking that 50 whatever year old in the eye and saying, this is a natural part of aging. Here's a rather than say, we're going to have you try diet and exercise for 6 months. They give them the pamphlet that they throw away.
Right.
And they go and they start them on something, right? We're going to start you on an antihypertensive. So you're going to leave my office today on a medication, right? Then the second lie that we tell them, or I don't know if we actually tell them this or if they just convince themselves, is, well, I'm on the medication for it, so I don't really have that problem anymore. It's cured, right? Because I'm on high blood pressure.
Oh yeah, medication. I love that one. Yeah, I don't have high blood pressure.
Right. Why are you on high blood pressure?
These 5 pills.
Right. Yeah, literally 5 different pills.
Right? Yeah.
But so same guy goes into the same doctor and his testosterone levels are low.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So then they say, same thing. They say, well, this is just a natural part of aging. Okay, so you're going to give me something for it, right? Well, no.
You're right.
Because you should just accept it.
No.
Well, if I wasn't just going to accept high blood pressure, why should I accept low testosterone? Because these are all just numbers, right?
Right.
Should I just accept, that my prostate specific antigen is going up every year? Right. Should we just accept that?
Right.
That my muscle mass is going down. I should just accept that. My bone density is decreasing. I should just accept that. Why don't we do something for it? And I'll tell you what, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means, but I did a post like this about this a while back. And the fact that testosterone is in most formulations that you're going to get it as a bioidentical hormone means no drug company can patent it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So nobody's ever going to make as much money off of testosterone as they make off of a combo drug that lowers your blood pressure and your blood sugar. That maybe is going to come out next year.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a complicated issue. There's the old saying, like, if a doctor's not up on something, they're down on it.
Right.
It's totally true. And like that couldn't apply more than with testosterone. The thing is, you and I we went to the same medical school. We did our residency together. How many lectures and how much instruction, even on like off-service rotations, how much training did you and I get on how to properly prescribe a weight loss or even a muscle gain diet or an exercise program to a patient? I got 0. So everything I know about diet and exercise, I've had to go out and learn on my own. And
everything I know about diet and exercise was trial and error on myself as an individual and picking your brain and picking other people's brain.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I did. I found people smarter than me and I asked them to teach me, and I paid a lot of money to, go through various courses and get other certifications and stuff like that. That's the reason they hand you the pamphlet. There's 2 reasons. One is they don't know because they're probably in as bad a shape as the patient.
Right.
Like, if you look at doctors these days, most of them are not exactly the picture of health.
No.
And then the second thing is they're too busy.
Yeah, they just don't have time. They only have 15 minutes for that encounter.
Yep. You got 15 minutes. You got 30. You got to see, when I was a family med doc in the clinic, I was seeing 25 to 27, sometimes 30 people a day, which is completely average. A lot of docs that see more. But do you think I had time to sit down and talk to my diabetic patients for an hour about, like low carbohydrate diets or, weight training, that kind of stuff? Like I just didn't have time. I wanted to go home at some point that day. I still had charts to do at the end of the day. So docs, they don't get the training in it and they just don't have the time, to spend with them, which is, it's unfortunate because that's the solution to so much of this stuff. But, the testosterone thing is there's no training for testosterone replacement among primary care doctors in the United States, or very little. So, if, family medicine, your average internal medicine, family medicine doc, knows next to nothing about testosterone. Many of them still suffer from these like stereotypes that are like left over from the steroid PED, world, where they still think that testosterone causes prostate cancer, that it's going to give you a heart attack, that sort of thing. I have a YouTube channel as well, and I came across this. It was just the most egregious, most obnoxious lecture on testosterone that I'd ever heard in my entire life by a board certified cardiologist. And this woman got up there and basically was saying that low testosterone in men it's a pharma industry scam. And she goes, she got one of the, a quote from that talk. She said, "Do you really have low testosterone, or you really?" Well, she said, "You don't have low testosterone. What really happened is you just got old and you got fat." That's what she said.
So she doesn't even realize the kind of catch-22 that she actually put in there.
Yeah,
it's dude, it's
and this is like a very I had to look this lady up, well-respected cardiologist down in Texas, and she was talking to this is like a big CME conference. She was talking to residents and medical students. So people like that are influencing this young generation of doctors that are coming up with just some of the most ludicrous stuff about testosterone. And so, I do think that things are slowly getting better, because like the amount of data showing how beneficial therapeutic testosterone is for guys who have low T is huge. But there's still so much resistance. I call it testosterone phobia. So it's a real big thing. Time. They're just like, no, they just don't want to touch that. And so they'll refer you to an endocrinologist, who clearly knows a lot more about testosterone, but may or may not be on board with, what's, considered to be optimization. They just want to I want to share normal,
I want to share a horror story with you that I had a potential patient contact me via email. And basically the story was that they went to their PCP, had done their own research, which, usually I boohoo, but this guy had actually done some legit research, went to his PCP, and his PCP basically drew a line in the sand. And he told him, "I'm against testosterone replacement." He was using phraseology like, "I don't believe in it."
Okay.
Like shit like that. Right.
Yeah.
Finally, basically he said, "Okay, well then I'm going to find another doctor." So he begrudgingly agreed to put this guy on test. They did it wrong.
Of course.
Okay. He was having him do, instead of doing the, injecting once a week, he was having him do it it was something weird. It's like every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it was a really weird amount. And then he said to this guy, "So we're going to do this for 6 months. And then we're going to take you off of it for 6 months and check your levels again."
Yeah. Brilliant.
And it's like, wow, you didn't even bother to do 5 minutes of research.
Right.
Like you just literally just pulled that out of fucking your ass. So the next thing I want to talk about is, I want to talk about what, for those listening that are thinking, do I need this? Do I not need this? Let's talk about symptomology. What should be pushing them in that direction to at least ask their physician about it? And then what are the red flags and the green flags that when they go to their physician, they should be looking out for? Am I even talking to the right doctor? So let's talk to that for a moment.
Yeah, those are good questions. The symptoms, this is the difficulty with many things in the endocrine world, and not just testosterone, but this applies to thyroid and estradiol in women and stuff like that. Many of the symptoms of these sort of hormonal deficiencies, the symptoms are non-specific. So, they had come up with these questionnaires. One is an ADAM questionnaire. The other's the one I prefer is called the Aging Male Symptom Score. And
that's what I'm using in my practice as well.
Yeah. You and I have gone over this a few times, but it's sort of it's stuff like fatigue, poor concentration, low libido is a big one. Feeling kind of worn out by the end of the day, that kind of stuff. So, a lot of stuff can cause that. Poor sleep can cause that. Sleep apnea.
Sure.
A thyroid issue can cause that. So what I think guys should do if they want to just like kind of just start exploring this a little bit is download both of those questionnaires, and maybe you can put some links to it, in the show notes.
I can do that. I can put it in the show notes.
So do that and see what your score is. See what it comes out as. Now, the thing to remember is because these are non-specific, just because you score, let's say you score really high on both of them, that doesn't mean you have low testosterone. It just means you have a set of symptoms. You have a symptom complex that sounds suspicious for testosterone, for low testosterone. And so at that point, you need to go and you need to get some blood work done. And you need to find out, what your numbers are. But here's the other thing. This is our, getting onto like the mark of a good physician. So, and I've talked about this a bunch of times. If you walk into a doctor's office with a sheet of paper that has your testosterone level on it and it's low, and then you just 10 minutes later you walk out of there with a bottle of testosterone cypionate or a prescription, that's a red flag, right? You need to have a proper workup.
Yeah.
So, that's
not a cool doctor. That's a bad doctor.
That's a bad doctor. That's a very bad doctor who's probably going to lose his license, at some point. So, so do the symptom questionnaire. And then, you go to your physician with that. And a testosterone test should be only one of many tests that are done to work up those symptoms. It's not now, and this is the problem sometimes if you go to some of these like windmill TRT clinics, is they keep their doors open by selling you testosterone.
Yeah.
So they want to put, it's just like when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Yeah. So
when all you have is amoxicillin, the whole world looks like an ear infection.
100%. Yeah.
That's exactly what I like to say to pediatricians.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or if all you have is a Z-Pack, so, you need to make sure that, getting your testosterone check needs to be part of a broader workup. And that could include a sleep study. I get sleep studies on so many guys because so many people run around with sleep apnea. Well, they don't run around. They get it at night. They don't run around much because they're tired all day. Yeah. And you don't necessarily have to be, one of these really loud snorers, which is one of the hallmarks of sleep apnea. I was just consulting with a guy a few weeks ago who was told, at least by his wife, never said that he snored. He had severe sleep apnea when he finally got a sleep study done. So the point is, you present with a set of symptoms which may or may not be related to testosterone. So you just have to make sure that your doctor is not having the blinders on, okay, and they're not just saying, "Oh, this is just testosterone," and they only check testosterone related labs. You need to make sure you don't have something else going on.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you can't just be looking for one thing. And I get this all the time, mostly not as much from prospective patients, but usually from people that I know. Is they'll go, "Hey man, so I got my testosterone checked," and they'll give me the total testosterone number.
Right.
And they'll go, "What do you think about that?" And I'll go, I think you just gave me a number somewhere between 0 and infinity.
Right.
Like that's what I think.
Not as helpful as you might think. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, I need to know your symptom score. And second of all, I don't care as much about your total testosterone rather than I do your free testosterone.
Exactly.
Why don't you talk about the difference between those?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good point. The unfortunate thing is that in the US, like the Endocrine Society guidelines are all based off of total testosterone. They don't even mention free testosterone. But if you look at some of the andrology societies out there, the andrologists are like the super testosterone nerds of the urology world. They actually do include a free testosterone, what they consider to be a cutoff for low T. And so it's very important that you should get both. In fact, a lot of times they come as a combo. But you're right. Like if you come into me and you show me that you have a 600 total testosterone, I'm like, good for you. But what is your free testosterone? And for guys that don't know, most of your testosterone, your total testosterone is not, you can't use all of that. So roughly 98 to 99% of it is bound up in various proteins, mainly being something called SHBG, steroid hormone binding globulin, which acts like a reservoir. So it kind of, it sort of blinds your body, it doesn't take it out of circulation, but it takes it out of immediate use. And so what's left is like 1% to 2% that's actually like free floating through the serum and is able to get inside the cell, bind to the androgen receptor, go to the nucleus, and then like do its thing. So that's really like the free testosterone it's kind of where the rubber meets the road. And it's important because, you know, I know that you've seen it too, because we've talked about this, but you will have guys that are like pan positive on those symptom scores, and they go to their family doc and they get a total testosterone and it's 600. And they're like, dude, it's not a testosterone problem. And they're like, well, wait a minute, I got all these symptoms and we've done everything, we checked everything else and it's completely normal. But when you go and do a free testosterone on them, it's in the toilet.
Yeah.
And because it's all bound up with SHBG, you know, and then that's a whole nother discussion, you know, about, you know, what to do about that. So, you know, the point is like a total testosterone is not, you know, unless it's rock bottom low, you know, like if you're sub 350 on your total, your free is probably not that great. Like you got some problems going on there. But the other thing to talk to, you know, that's, I think it's important for guys to know is, you know, this stuff is so nuanced, and this is one of the problem with these guidelines that are sort of algorithmic, is they try to put everybody into one box, you know, and the fact is that, you know, the level at which you feel the level at which you are optimally healthy is going to vary from individual to individual. Like, you know,
I have a patient, and you and I consulted on this patient a little bit. I have a patient that I lowered his T dose, and he felt better.
Oh, totally. I see that all the time.
Because his number, he was getting too much, and he was converting it because of his body fat. I have two patients that have almost identical labs, and I have drastically different treatment strategies for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not, you're right. It's extremely nuanced. And I don't think a lot of people that are doing it, that are willing to do it, have some level of training and are doing it. Like you say, they're treating algorithmically, and they're not looking at the nuances in this. And I literally, especially when I get a new patient, I try to sit down and I say, okay, I try to push all experience out of my head and treat this is a brand new day. This is a brand new patient. This is a person who comes to me with a unique story, unique problems. They are different than everybody else that I've ever treated.
Yeah.
And I resist that urge to go, okay, I get the email with their labs. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. This is what they're going to get.
Yeah.
You have to resist the urge to do that, because once you do that, you're not treating the patient, you're treating numbers, right?
And that's you know, getting back to the red flag thing about clinics, some of these testosterone mills, you know, they just have these cookie cutter protocols. Everybody gets a cc of testosterone, 1 cc per week. Here's your HCG, 1,000 units twice a week, 3 times a week, and then your milligram of anastrozole, and off you go. You know, and then they get to charge you, you know, monthly. And it just says like this rubber stamp, everybody gets the same protocol. And it's just like really bad, sloppy medicine. It's super sloppy. But getting back to your point though, like you know, with individual variations, there's a couple things that I think are important for guys to understand is when we get blood levels on patients, we're getting blood levels. I'm getting the amount of testosterone that's in your blood. Where does testosterone exert its activity? It's within the cell, and actually specifically in the nucleus. So I'm sort of making educated guesses about what's happening inside your cells based on a number that comes from outside of your cells, because those two may not be the same thing.
No,
but that's all I got, right? Like I don't have a test that tells me what's going on in the nucleus of your cells with your androgen receptors and all that kind of stuff. So that's why this is a bit fuzzy in some cases. And then the second point, you know, that gets back to genetic variations in men, and there are multiple different things that come into play, but one of them is the androgen receptor, what binds the testosterone in the cell. So there are guys that have very sensitive androgen receptors, and there are guys that have very insensitive androgen receptors. And this is well documented. You can look it up in any of the urology literature. And it has to do with these, CAG repeats on the DNA, you have the gene, So, but the point is, like, if you have a very sensitive receptor, you don't need a ton of testosterone to bind and, have a good effect. So those are the guys that, that you and I see walking around with a total T of 350, for example, and maybe a free T of like 6, who feel great. They're jacked. They've got good libido. They have no symptoms. When they do those symptom scores, they're like, meh, they're pretty good. Now, those guys they're not super common, but they are out there. And then, the flip side of that, of course, is that there are guys who have solidly good numbers on both total and free who still have symptoms. And you do a workup and you can't find anything else wrong with them. Well, those guys may have an androgen receptor that's just their genetics.
Yeah.
They need a higher concentration of testosterone in order to saturate and activate that receptor to get the same clinical effect that a guy with a really efficient receptor, he doesn't need as much. So that's why this is like super individualized. You can't cookie cutter this stuff.
And we talked earlier about, doctors only checking the total testosterone number. And I told a prospective patient a little while back, I said, that's the equivalent of if you took your car to the mechanic and they looked and all they looked at was your gas gauge. Yeah. And they said, well, you got a full tank of gas. I don't know what to tell you. Right. Your gas gauge doesn't tell you anything about how your carburetor is working. It doesn't tell you if your plugs are fouling. It doesn't tell you if your rings are leaking. You got a blown gasket. It doesn't tell you any of these things. And I think of total testosterone as the gas in the tank, and the free testosterone as to how much is getting through that carburetor and igniting and doing the job that it's supposed to do. And that's why the aging male symptom score comes into play. The Adams score comes into play, because that's like, when I take a survey, that's like when a mechanic asks you, well, what's it doing? What's it doing when you drive? Well, there's a knocking sound.
Right.
Right. So, these are the important things that you have to know, because there's a lot of things that they can't, and I'm using the term carburetor, which I don't even think most vehicles don't even have anymore. Now they plug in a USB to your car, and in 5 minutes, they know exactly what's wrong with it.
Yeah. These days it's a little different. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a little harder with people because we don't, you can't plug a USB up my nose and figure out, oh, you have a receptor problem. So you got to do more work.
Right.
What do you think about this? What about the guys? Because I get this a lot too, right? They come to me and maybe their numbers they're on the low end, but they're not terrible. And they're kind of maybe borderline on the symptom score. And I get this question all the time. Well, hey doc, what about, I see these late night ads for these testosterone boosters, or I was told if I eat papayas, it'll, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't even know if anybody said, somebody probably has said that. If we Google papaya testosterone, we'll probably see it. What do you think about this? Now, I mean, granted, eating better, getting enough water, exercise, yes, that will absolutely boost your testosterone. But what about these products or these miracle foods, superfoods, whatever you want to call them?
Yeah.
Have any of them ever borne fruit when researched?
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, you can find these isolated studies. Most of them are very small with, different herbs. Tonga Ali is the one that, what's a Huberman I was always talking about. And, they'll say, oh yeah, it improved testosterone over a course of 6 weeks by 150 points, blah, blah, blah. But, again, what happened after those 6 weeks, and did it improve symptoms at all? Yeah. Well, the answer to that is probably not. So there's all these you can find studies to support almost anything that you want. But what I've seen consistently is that even the ones that show these various substances have these little, have increases in testosterone, it's not of any sort of long-term clinical significance. And it's not going to be enough to move the needle. Yeah. If you've got a total testosterone of 300, for example, and to be optimally healthy, we need to get you, let's just say 700 arbitrarily. There's not enough papaya in the world to get you up that high. All right. It is not going to happen. So if you want to, want to try that stuff. If you're a young guy and you want to try it, go ahead. But I think you're wasting your money.
Yeah.
You need to do what you said. You need to correct all of your lifestyle deficiencies, of which most guys are guilty of many of those.
Mm-hmm.
They need to get their body fat percentage down. And then, if they can't move the needle that way, then, they need to consider supplementing with bioidentical testosterone if indicated.
Yeah. I think a pretty significant confounding variable in a lot of these testosterone boosters is guys get to the point where, enough is enough. They have their come to Jesus moment or their New Year's resolution, whatever it is. And so they go to the refrigerator, they throw out all the junk food. They go to the supermarket, they buy healthy food. They go sign up for a gym membership, and all on the same trip. They go to GNC and they walk in there and they go, "What do you have this testosterone boosting?" And that little clerk at GNC, who failed out of high school their junior year, knows nothing about science, their eyes just light up, right? And they just take them around the store and they give them every testosterone booster known to man. Within about 2 weeks, they're feeling quite a bit better because they're eating better, they're working out, they're drinking more water. It has nothing to do with all these bogus testosterone boosters. I think I told you this story. I had somebody wanted me to endorse a product that when I did further research on it, I found out it was literally dirt. It was literally a jar of dirt. Right. And the guy tells me, he goes, dude, I've been taking this for 6 weeks. I feel so much better. My energy level, my appetite is down. I've lost weight. I'm feeling great. So he sends me this dirt, and you got to take it 6 to 8 times a day with a full glass of water. And so right away I said, you weren't drinking enough water. Now all of a sudden you're getting enough water.
Right.
The dirt. Exactly. And it was literally like this little pinch of dirt in an 8-ounce glass of water. 6 to 8 times a day. It's like you're getting enough for the first time in your adult life. You're getting enough water, and you think it's the fucking dirt,
right?
So, people need to understand. That's why I think if we need to be teaching in high school what a confounding variable is.
Oh my God, yeah, exactly.
That correlation does not equal causation. What the placebo effect really means. I think people would be more successful in life as adults if we took the time to teach that in high school. Really do.
These people are like, they're not knowing those sorts of things. Just it makes you vulnerable to scam artists.
Yeah, totally.
And quackery. Otherwise you'd have your bullshit detector, out, and you would be able to pick up on that. But we're always going to have. There's always going to be people trying to make a buck off of people's desperation. And a lot of times, people don't want to hear what you and I have to say, which is there's only one way, and you have to clean up your act. And that is a very difficult thing to do, especially if you've been out of the game for a long time in terms of being healthy. If you're a retired active duty guy who used to be, in great shape, and now you let yourself go 20 years down the road, it's very hard to get back into that groove again. It's even harder if you've never done it. If you've been out of shape since you were a little kid, which is basically this whole, like these last 2 generations, essentially, have been out of shape and playing video games since they were 3 years old. It's extreme. Starting new habits is hard. And making those kind of radical changes is extremely difficult. So when somebody is out there like, hey, I've got this shortcut, I've got this magic dirt that will get you to where you want to be a lot easier, and you don't have to work as hard. Yeah, of course they're going to take it.
Yeah.
But, they're just getting played,
Yeah.
So, there's no shortcut.
No, they're 100% they're getting played.
Yeah.
So talking about the kind of the journey of the patient or the prospective patient. So they identify, the symptoms we're going to talk. And again, I'm going to put in the show notes, I'm going to put links so they can check out their symptom score. They get their labs drawn. They find a physician who is competent, who knows how to do this. They get put on testosterone. They're on testosterone. What should they be looking for as far as unwanted side effects, or what are some things they need to be very mindful of while they're on testosterone that they might not be aware of?
Yeah. It's a great question because, most guys have no side. If in a properly formulated protocol, you should not really have side effects to speak of, in any serious way. If you're experiencing side effects, for example, we'll just pick like water retention, which is like a very common one in the first few weeks of starting on testosterone. So there's a lot of reasons for why that happens, but that might be an indication that let's just say, for example, like one of the standard things that many clinics will do is I'll have you inject once a week, for example. It's pretty standard. Well, when you inject whatever your dose is, you're going to have this big peak, and you will probably be super physiologic for a few days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's things that happen there in that super physiologic time. You do aromatize to estradiol, you get a little bit more DHT conversion. Those things, the estradiol, for example, can, it activates the renin-angiotensin system and makes you more sensitive to antidiuretic hormones. So you might pull in a little bit of extra fluid. And then, as the week goes on, you kind of go back down, and then you redose again. So you may be riding a bit of a roller coaster. And also, some guys may feel really good for the first 3 or 4 days on a once a week protocol. And then like day 4, 5, 6, they're maybe not quite feeling so good. So that might be an indication that you need to split up your dose. And, I think probably for most guys, a twice a week injection protocol is probably going to end up being the best. But, I encourage my guys to experiment with it, just like I have. Now I'm on a once a week protocol, but it's only because I've tried every single combination, including every single day, and I felt no different. So I had no problems. But there are guys sometimes when their levels are a little bit on the high side, they get anxious, they just don't feel as good as they should. And so those guys, if you can divide that up, into 2, maybe 3 injections a week, you get just a smoother curve. And that many times will handle some of these adverse effects. Now, as far as what I see happen a lot, and this is a pet peeve of mine, is guys will get the water retention issue, and their doctor will be like, "Oh, you have too much estrogen," and they'll put you on some anastrozole, an aromatase inhibitor, which is a terrible idea.
I've noticed that a lot of doctors really want to throw anastrozole at you.
They do. And to be fair, like when I got my training in this stuff, 10 years ago, that was kind of like standard protocol, right? Well, you have to, God forbid, estrogen, testosterone good, estrogen bad, right? Well, it turns out it's a lot more nuanced than that. And estrogen is many of the benefits that guys get from testosterone therapy, or what they think they're getting from the testosterone, the benefits are actually from the estradiol. So without getting like too much into the weeds on it, anastrozole, taking anastrozole to lower estradiol, especially like for water retention, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Estradiol has so many beneficial effects that you don't need to, you should not block it. There are other ways to handle water retention, for example, one of which is if you just wait it out, things kind of balance out. Okay. And additionally, your estradiol levels will come down, because where does most of the estradiol come from? It comes from aromatization in body fat. So if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're losing body fat, your estradiol level will correct itself. So, but if you need something in the short run, like I put guys on like an angiotensin receptor blocker, like I like telmisartan, for example, is a good one that fixes that renin-angiotensin issue. They dump a little bit of water. They actually get some beneficial cardiac effects from it. And then we, can revisit that, whether they need to stay on it. But the problem is they get put on anastrozole and then they stay on it. They're on it for years, and the whole time, the anastrozole is adversely affecting their cardiovascular health in a number of different ways. So, so that's a big pitfall that, unfortunately I see all too commonly. The clinics here in town just hand out anastrozole like it's candy. And they just don't read the literature. Like that's not good medicine. It's very, I won't say, in medicine, the words always and never, you got to be careful about those. But, I can't recall the last time I prescribed anastrozole. And if I ever needed to, it would be for a very short period of time, just to address a specific set of symptoms. And then I would take the guy off of it once whatever the underlying issue was taken care of. So.
What Not everybody who reaches out to me as a potential patient can end up being my patients because currently I'm only practicing in Texas, but I
Yeah.
do give a certain level of advice. I don't give what we would term to be medical advice to
Right.
people via email, but I
Yeah.
will give them advice on what to look for in
Yep.
the physician that can manage them.
Yep.
And I tell
Me too.
people this all the time: be really leery of if a doctor wants to put you on a medication and you say, okay, why? So you're starting me on this and you're already going to add this. Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And if they use
Yeah.
phraseology like, if the first thing they say is, well, some patients find that, or some patients respond to, it's like, well,
Mhm.
maybe I'm not some patient. So why don't we hold
Right.
off on that? Right. I'm
Right.
not saying you have to fire that provider, but
Mhm.
don't that's a cue to you that they're basically trying to put you into an algorithm, right? Like you're going to
Yeah.
come in today,
It could
you're
be.
going to go
Yeah.
from point A to point B, and at point
Uh-huh.
B you're going to get your testosterone, your anastrozole, your what your I'm going to, maybe I'm going to put you uh on on something for your cholesterol at the same time. It's so be very leery of that.
I agree.
That it,
Yeah.
if they use phraseology that says, well, some find, or just in case, or you might experience,
Mhm.
let's wait.
I agree. Yeah.
It's because if it was really that cut and dry, we would have found a way to combine them into one shot.
Yeah.
We would have done that, right? So it's
Well,
obviously not that
yeah.
cut and dry.
And that's the nice thing about, the way that you and I practice with our particular men's health clinics is we have the time to answer those questions.
Mhm.
So I enjoy talking to guys about this stuff. Like I love it when my patients ask me questions because I have, when I see a patient in a telemedicine visit, many times they might be the only patient I have scheduled that day.
Mhm.
So I got hours to spend. I will answer all of your questions in painful detail, and I want to do that for you. And explain, okay, why are you putting me on this medicine? Okay, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
These are the benefits that I think you will get from this. These are the potential side effects or harms. This is the duration that I think you might need this, whether it's short term, long term. And then ultimately, like I let I don't push anything on patients other than diet and exercise. Like you have to train hard and you have to eat right if you're going to be my patient. But if they read something on the internet and they're just like adamantly opposed to a certain drug or a certain intervention, that's cool. Like
Mhm.
we'll work around it. Just because I think you need it doesn't mean that I'm not God. You know,
Right.
and maybe we can try something different.
Yeah.
You know.
Is there what just you don't have to go through a whole laundry list, but are there what are you seeing commonality wise in your practice now? In addition to testosterone, are there other peptides or other medications that you are
Yeah.
using? You're seeing a preponderance of need for that you're putting patients on currently.
I can't think of one thing in particular that that I'm like universally recommending, but I use and this is not in everybody, but a reasonable amount of metformin,
Mhm.
which is a diabetes drug for my guys that have insulin resistance. I find that it can be beneficial for them. It may have some anti-cancer properties. There's some debatable longevity, benefits to it that we'll have an answer on that hopefully pretty soon. There's some big studies on metformin. So I use, metformin not, infrequently. I have a small handful of guys that are on some of these new GLP-1 agonists. And you guys
Mhm.
talked about this, like the brand name Ozempic,
Mhm.
that for guys that really are struggling to lose weight and have,
Which we now
no,
have a national shortage of
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
for
Well,
just
it's all the
reason.
Hollywood, all the Hollywood
Yeah.
weirdos are taking it.
Yeah.
But
You know
it
what? You
is,
know what's funny about that is they were talking about like I don't know Rosie O'Donnell and a couple other people about how much weight they lost, and it was actually completely insignificant amounts.
yeah.
And a
Well,
lot of them, it was like I lost 10 pounds. It's like that's a good
well,
shit.
Rosie O'Donnell probably is not. There's a reason Rosie O'Donnell got fat in the first place, and
Yeah.
I doubt you can't. You can't just take Ozempic and then eat like a moron. And
Right.
not like you still have to be on a program. So, but if you
Yeah.
do everything else right, the Ozempic in some cases can help. It's not a long-term, no drug is a long-term fix for,
Yeah.
your poor lifestyle, obviously.
And that actually dovetails right into the final topic that I wanted to talk about, because it's something that's really at the core of my practice and at the core of your practice. And really it's a core philosophy, and because we share pretty similar philosophies when it comes to lifestyle too, is I can tell you with my patients, when I onboard a new patient, two things: they have to put the chronometer app on their phone, and they have to keep a food and exercise diary, at least for the first 2 weeks they're my patient.
Yep.
And they either have to use the MyZone heart monitor, just because that's the one I use. I don't get paid to say that, or a similar heart monitor that I can see what they're doing. I like MyZone because I use one and I can just add them as a friend on MyZone, and I can see that they're working out. Right.
Yeah.
And I tell them, if you're going to use whatever, an Apple Watch or whatever, then I'm going to need you to email it to me every day.
Right.
Because I'm going to need to see that. Right. And if you don't email me, I know you didn't work out that day.
Right.
And I'm checking. That's one of the first things I do every day when I get up. I check my emails and everything, and I pull my phone out. What did my patients eat yesterday? What kind of exercise did my patients do yesterday? This guy hasn't logged a workout in 5 days. What's going on there? He didn't tell me he was traveling. He didn't tell me he had any family stuff going on. So then there's an email that gets generated from that. Hey man, what's going on? Because these are not magic pills. These are not shortcuts. These are not cheating, right? You still have to put in the work.
Absolutely.
Right. And I tell everybody all the time, I'm like, if you're not going to put in the work, there's 100 doctors in this town that'll treat you. And I'm not one of them. Because I expect you to put in the work. And quite frankly, some don't want to, some are hungry for that. And that's exactly what they wanted to hear. And some, that's not what they're looking for.
Well, there's, it's a good segue into a really important point where, there's a group of guys out there that they think that testosterone is going to solve all their problems,
Right.
I'll start working out. Once I get on TRT, everything's going to be great.
I'll feel great.
I'll feel great. And that's when I'll start eating right. And that's when I'll start.
That's when I'll start going to jujitsu.
Yeah. You're going to have good and bad days, even when you're hormonally optimized. That's welcome to real life. You're going to have days where you feel bad, and you're going to have days when you feel good. And, the goal is to have more good days than bad days,
Yeah.
But it's really important to set expectations. This is not gonna, if you've got a bad marriage, it's getting on testosterone may or may not influence that. Okay. If you have terrible sleep, if you eat junk food all the time, there's not enough testosterone in the world to make up for that. So you have to do it's just mandatory. In my opinion, you're basically wasting your time, on TRT. I know that's a controversial statement because, maybe there still could be some benefits, even if you're a complete slug, but you're just missing out. It's getting on TRT is such a golden opportunity to get your life right. That you need to do, if you do all those things, this is what I talk about in age, the pillars of age management are, nutrition, exercise, and hormonal optimization. Each one of those things individually can move the needle a lot for you. But when you do all three of them together and those gears start turning each other, that's kind of, that's like when the magic happens. And that's when you see these guys who I dropped 120 pounds in a year, and I put on 25 pounds of lean muscle mass. That's, but the hormonal optimization is the least important part of those three things.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, because I've found personally that when one of those three things drops off, it's noticeable.
100%.
It's 100%. It's 100% noticeable. Up to and including, I have been off of TRT for an extended period, and I was absolutely miserable. But guess what? I wasn't miserable. It took me a couple of weeks to get miserable. If I'm not exercising or I'm not eating right, I get miserable in about 2 or 3 days.
Absolutely.
I notice that a lot quicker.
When I do a run of ER shifts, if I work 5 shifts in a row, I feel like dog shit, after that.
You know,
Doesn't
you
matter
mentioned
what my T
you
levels
mentioned
are.
the good days and the bad days, and as ER physicians, one thing that we're no stranger to is abdominal pain patients.
Yeah.
And you always get, you have the as you're rolling your eyes, you get
Yeah.
the chronic abdominal pain patients.
Oh yeah.
And
My favorite.
I actually had to sit down with one of them one time. I said, "Look, you have a functional digestive system. You have 21 feet of muscles that are contracting all the time. It's perfectly
Mhm.
reasonable that at times you will have some level of discomfort from those
Mhm.
21 feet of contracting muscles.
Mhm.
Stop coming and getting CAT scans."
Right. Yeah. You're
Like
going to be painful.
this was one of those patients that literally was getting like 13 CAT scans a year.
It's so, yeah. And,
Yeah, it's
shame on
just,
the doctors for doing that too. Like,
yeah,
you
yeah,
gotta, but unfortunately, there's some asshole out there on YouTube who's more than willing to sell them like a colon cleanse, um,
right.
you know, to, to fix whatever this issue is,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's the way it is.
yeah. 100%. Anything
Yeah.
else? Where can people find you? Where can they contact you?
Oh,
Where are
sure.
what states are you currently accepting patients from? Give them all that information.
So if you want to get a hold of me, you can go to my website. It's just manmedicine.com. Feel free to shoot me a message there. I've got a YouTube channel under the same name. You can message me there as well. I've got active licenses in Oregon, Utah, Florida, and soon to be Texas. Um, One thing we should probably mention this real quick, and you are probably aware of this about this Ryan Haight Act that the DEA is about
Yeah.
to drop the hammer on with telemedicine. So maybe you
Yeah.
could put a link in the show notes about this. If this legislation is enacted, which is supposed to happen, I think it's either May 11th or May 12th, I think.
Mhm.
It is essentially going to end the ability for physicians to prescribe testosterone via telemedicine. It will place like these insurmountable hurdles basically for men.
Mhm.
So we really need people to go to the DEA website. They have a site there where you can put your comments in there. And I would ask guys to do who are watching this, if you haven't already, if you're getting testosterone, via telemedicine, write, be professional. Don't use 4-letter words, to the
Yeah.
DEA.
Don't
Uh,
the DEA doesn't respond well to being called libtards.
they don't
So
like
don't do
that.
that.
They don't like that. So write in there how this legislation is going to harm you and how it's going to impact you, because there is precedent, for the DA to back off on stuff like this, because this is a legislation that just doesn't make any sense.
No.
I think it's designed to help with the opiate issue, but
Yeah,
unfortunately,
which I
because
get, which I
yeah,
get.
I get that,
But yeah.
but testosterone was inappropriately labeled as Schedule 3, back in the
Mhm.
day, and
Yeah.
so testosterone is dragged right into this. But this is
Yeah.
affecting people who are getting Suboxone and things like that for their opiate issues, other controlled substances for like restless leg syndrome. Like it's not just testosterone. So I would say I ask people to please to petition the DA to pull back on that, at least in the world of testosterone, because if that legislation goes through, you and I are not going to really be able to help guys unless we physically have to see them in person. So unless
Mhm.
you live in my city or in your city directly and can do a face-to-face visit,
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to prescribe testosterone, which would be, given what we talked about at the beginning of the show with this, epidemic of low testosterone. I mean,
Mhm.
we need to remove barriers to treatment, not put up new barriers to treatment.
Yeah. I don't know which is dumber, the fact that a bioidentical hormone is a
Right.
Schedule 3 drug, or that a plant is a Schedule 1 drug. I mean, the fact that
Right.
cannabis in
Right.
2023, the fact that cannabis is still considered a Schedule 1 drug
Right.
is completely ridiculous in my opinion. But I mean, that just good when you get the inertia, it's once there is a law,
Yeah.
it's hard to change that law. So
Oh,
if this,
they
if,
won't go back. I think
yeah,
it'll always be. It should never have been scheduled in the first place
yeah,
to Schedule 3, but um, what's done is done. It's
yeah,
very unlikely that they would repeal that. I guess there's always hope, but you
yeah.
know, Congress is not known for making decisions that are logical and make sense.
No, well, there was a bill in Congress to make fentanyl a Schedule 1 drug.
Right.
And
Yeah.
fentanyl's a great drug. Fentanyl, they're not differentiating between fentanyl
Mhm.
pills coming across the border that
Right.
got pressed that were pressed in Juarez, and the
Mhm.
fentanyl that I'm giving in the back of an ambulance, in my ER,
Yeah, exactly.
whatever.
Exactly.
It's, completely different.
Yeah, fentanyl is, you and I both know. Anyone who works in the emergency department or an ICU knows how useful fentanyl is.
Oh,
It's
fentanyl's
extraordinarily
amazing.
useful, and it's in that environment, it's perfectly safe.
Yep, totally.
Yeah.
Well, brother, thank you for coming
Yeah,
on,
my
and
pleasure.
we'll do it again and again and again,
Yeah.
as many times as it's necessary. And everybody listening, make sure you go to manmedicine.com, check out Drew's website. He's an amazing resource. Make sure you check out his YouTube channel. Make sure you go and politely complain to the DEA about this upcoming change, and I'll try to put a link to that in the show notes as well. I am going to leave you today with a quote from the Apostle Paul, who said, "Be alert, stand firm in the faith, act like a man, be strong." Remember that, everybody. And until next time, live life like a warrior.